Good morning. This is an absolutely special edition of the Friday Fireside, and I'm here with Patrick Donoghue. And once again, as he always tends to do, he's going to blow our collective minds. Patrick, how are you?
It's always good to see you, Rick. Yeah, I like to be on the cutting edge all the time. I like to be a little uncomfortable. So this one's an interesting topic that you brought
Okay,
up.
so in terms of cutting edge, I've known you for a long time, and you've had a variety of jobs. What are you up to these days?
I'm always, like I say, I'm always the early adopter. I'm always bringing in new technology to help people figure out ways to make better content, that kind of thing. So, my history, whether it's interactive television, whether it's metaverse, VR, AR, and AI is super hot, obviously. And as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and as a consultant to the entertainment industry, it's happening. It's really happening in a big way. And so the technology is almost there, and we got some examples. But what happens once these things start to get real and people start to pay attention, then the business starts to pay attention.
No,
So
that's right.
I think we're
Okay.
at that inflection point. And the reason we're talking is because this technology is so powerful that now I think people are really, you know, looking.
Okay, so now very recently, a couple of studios took issue with some of the companies who are allowing generative AI, if I said that correctly.
Yeah,
So,
you do.
who are those companies? You're going to show us some examples, which talk about mind-blowing. Um, who are those companies and what are they suing for or why are they doing it?
Right. So let's start just real quick on generative AI. Probably most of your audience knows, but that's
Yep.
basically the technology where I can just type in a prompt, right, a sentence, basically a description, and create an image or a video. That technology has dramatically improved over the last 18 months to the point where one of the leading providers is Midjourney. And their technology is fantastic. They make absolutely stunning images. Um, and so if people haven't tried Midjourney, you should definitely go try it or any one of them. So Midjourney does this amazing job of creating imagery. And what's happened is people have started to use it to do lots of things, including intellectually protected copywritten images. So if you go to Midjourney and you type Darth Vader, you'll see hundreds of examples of people creating images of Darth Vader. Disney characters, Universal characters. So that's a problem for Disney and Universal for obvious reasons. It's their intellectual property, it's their copywritten material. They spend a lot of money producing it. And so, yeah, this lawsuit was brought by Disney and Universal specifically against Midjourney to kind of address this issue.
Now, tell us a little bit about Midjourney. They are not owned by Apple or Google or one of the big dogs or
No, no, I don't actually know who their corporate ownership might be. I think they're independent. And this case is not, I mean, it's about Midjourney, but it's ultimately, I think, going to be one of those sort of like cases that sort of sets a standard for the
sure.
industry because
Oh,
they
yeah, no.
all more or less work the same way.
Yep.
You literally type in a prompt and you'll see an example where I typed in Darth Vader standing menacingly shaking his fist over Luke Skywalker. That's more or less all I typed, and I got a pretty great image, which is amazing as a fan. Um, I think where it gets tricky is once people start making money on these things. There's a couple legal issues with that, but yeah, that's what Midjourney is, and that's what they do.
Now, in terms of creative process, you didn't have to say his head is too small, raise his visor. He should have four buttons on his chest plate, not three. You didn't have to do any of that, did you?
No, it's a very good point because if you're making an image from scratch, you'll often provide all that detail, right?
Been
Time of
there,
day,
done that. It's a pain in the
yeah,
neck.
yeah, and you have to be very explicit. And that's actually a good point because in the case of the Darth Vader example, I didn't say what Darth Vader looked like. I didn't say anything about his cape, his helmet, like you say, the gear on his chest. I just said Darth Vader. So I think the question from a legal perspective is how does Midjourney know who Darth Vader is and what he looks like? I mean, that if you read their lawsuit, that's one of the questions. And what Universal and Disney is saying, or I guess supposing, is that Midjourney may have what they call trained their model, which is you provide input data, right? And that model learns. That's how generative AI works. So I guess their question is, or statement is that it looks like Midjourney, from their perspective, they're saying Midjourney probably trained on our images, and it's a little bit murky from a legal perspective. There's a lot of different legal cases about what's actually fair use. Can people use copywritten images for training data? So it's a gray area.
But what if Midjourney didn't use actual copyrighted Disney images of Darth Vader? What if they used a handful of things that users had created
Yeah,
and they fine-tuned it? All of a sudden, now is Disney going after me?
that's a very good question. It's interesting. My understanding of it is, as we've seen, you and I've talked about, there's tons of fan art, fan films, all that stuff. You go on YouTube, you'll find incredible work that nobody's really monetizing, except maybe YouTube. And typically, the studios don't go after those people. Um, so, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and I guess once they get into the lawsuit, it'll be a question of can they prove or disprove what training data was used for Midjourney? Because you're right, maybe it's fan art. Or I don't know. I'm not sure how that would work legally.
Now, we were talking when we were warming up about fan art, and I've been to some comic book shows with my son, and you'll always see the long aisle of folks, mostly guys, but people who are painting artwork and creating posters and images of, Darth Vader shaking hands with Luke Skywalker, and they say, the fight is over. Whatever, whatever. They're doing that and they're selling those things. So why doesn't Disney go after them?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that technically they probably could. There's probably just they're too small and there's too many of them, which is why Midjourney I think is a target because they're big and again it's going to be a hopefully a sort of precedent setting case from Disney Universal's perspective. But as I understand it, yeah, if you're selling images, videos, whatever of copywritten material, that's technically not allowed, right? Unless you get a license approval, sign some sort of
No
agreement,
one's going to
which
do that.
which
Okay,
you,
but
you know they're
now
not doing, right?
Disney might also say, as well as Warner Brothers and any IP owner might also say, you know what, having the fans do this builds the brand.
Hmm.
It'll help us sell more movie tickets next time the thing is coming around. But what if somebody, and let's say Midjourney, actually makes episode 10 of Star
Right.
Wars?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting question there. I mean, there are incredible AI films made entirely in AI. A company called Runway just had their AI film festival a few weeks ago. I suggest people look it up and go watch. They're amazing, and the difference from last year to this year is noteworthy. Like these are viable, interesting, creative expressions. A lot of the new AI generators like VO and some of the others will generate audio too. So if you type in your prompt, guy jumps off a building, screaming cowabunga, it'll make that video and the guy will be screaming it and you'll hear his voice. It's kind of amazing actually. So the tools are there, right? I mean, they're inches away from being ready for that. And we can talk a little about some of the big filmmakers that are embracing AI. But yeah, so once you create that one of those fan films, what's next? I don't know if you do a lot of TikTok. But I've noticed this trend on TikTok, these sort of like selfie videos that people are making, where it's like, have you seen those? Or it's just like sometimes it's
Now
an
they're
abominable
short.
snowman. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
by
I've seen lots of
definition,
like,
they're short. So no one's packing the multiplex with TikTok movies yet.
yeah, but I've seen ones with like, stormtroopers from Star Wars with a selfie stick walking through, the Death Star, right? And they're really convincing.
And funny.
Yeah, and funny.
And
And those are the same thing. The voices are generated, everything's generated by computer. So to your question, when is someone going to make a film? Soon, very
yeah, it's
soon, I
going to
would
happen
say.
pretty soon. Okay. Speaking of making things, you made some things for us to look at. So now we're
Yeah,
going to try sharing your screen while we're recording this show. God willing, and the creek don't rise, it's going to work and not crash everybody's computer. And lo and behold, there it is.
magic. We did it.
So this is the name of this is the legal language on the complaint, right?
Yeah, I lifted this directly off of there. So, complaint for direct copyright infringement and secondary copyright infringement, demand for jury trial. And this is from Disney and Universal. Apparently, they joined together on this one.
And this was done, we're recording this on June 20th. It'll air on the 27th. This was done within like the last 10 days, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. As soon as you contacted me and we set this up, it wasn't that long ago.
Wow. Oh,
So let's
what's
talk a
that?
little bit about it because I think this is really informative. These are all images that are actually pulled from the lawsuit, and they did a great job. So the image on the left is a Midjourney image, and the images on the right are grabs from, I guess, the films or TV show. And again, the prompts, as I understand it, were as simple as Shrek standing next to you know his hut. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to not know or to know what that is. Here's another example, Midjourney on the left. So Lion King.
All right, now I need to draw everybody's attention. Look on the top right image, Nala and the king and what's his face and the little one, and they're running credits. They are in the lower right-hand corner of that screen.
Yeah, I
That's
noticed that too.
right from the movie.
Yeah, you'll see in a couple of these, it's literally a screen grab from the movie. But if you notice, the colors are right, the style is right, the rock that they're standing on, the sort of, I mean, it's it's quite good.
Oh,
Another one,
wow.
Little Mermaid. This one, I would say the image on the left looks a little more 3D generated as opposed to the right, which is a little more cell shaded because it's an older film. But there's no doubt that's Ariel, and
Yeah, but you know what? Her lips are wrong. Flounder's nose is too big. So there are some things that are not exactly right in that.
actually now that you say that, I look and her arms kind of disappear at the elbow. So the sort of
Oh,
classic
that's,
AI.
that's the old problem where they created an image and the person has six fingers.
Totally. Uh, this one I found interesting because I think it's
Wow.
important for people to notice. So what we looked at previously was animated films, right? So
Yep.
these are frames from The Mandalorian on the right. Great show. And like you say, there's still credits and things running in the little screen grabs. So these are real screen grabs. And on the left are images of Grogu and The Mandalorian. Totally buy these, 100%. If someone
Absolutely. Okay,
sent
now
you that,
let's talk about those Mandalorian live action scenes. If I remember part of the way that stuff was created, Mando was actually carrying a doll around for a lot of that stuff.
yeah, it was
Grogu was not
animatronic.
generated and dropped in, but the background certainly was. I mean, he wasn't standing out there, Pedro
Yeah,
Pascal was not standing in a desert somewhere.
yeah, these were mostly shot with the volume, which is the technology they created, where it's basically a huge display, and there's a computer generated background and all that. So that's almost certainly how that was done. But if you look like in the bottom left, notice the light, how it comes across from the side and kind of does
Yeah,
an edge light.
yeah.
It's very believable.
It is absolutely believable, but if I were Midjourney, I would say to Disney, well, you can use computer generated graphics to create your image, so can I.
Right. No, you're right. And we can talk a little bit about that.
Whoa.
So of course, I love making things. I've loved designing things. I've been an editor, a filmmaker, 3D artist, you name it. I just love to get my hands dirty, and that's how I learned
You like
technology.
making trouble. Come on, let's get down to the core of it. All right.
I do like making trouble.
You do like making trouble.
I'm just always curious, and when I see something, I'm like, wonder if I could do that. So this was
You
the
did
challenge.
this?
Yeah. So this is the challenge, right? I love Indiana Jones, and also I know it's I guess a Disney property at this point. So I started in Midjourney, which I've been using since the beginning, and
Okay.
I created this first frame. So the first frame is a text description. It basically says, and I used specifically Indiana Jones, fedora, whip, in an ancient temple with firelight. Boom! It created that image.
You didn't have to say an Inca temple or an Egyptian temple or a Mayan temple. You just said ancient temple, and it
Yeah,
grabbed one and put it in, and you found it appropriate. But you
yeah,
could have said, you know what? The base of the temple needs to be wider than the top. It needs to be more like a
totally.
pyramid. You could have given those rather typical, in my world, instructions, but you just said, make me a temple with
Yeah,
Indiana Jones wearing his wearing his fedora. And
yeah.
did you say Indiana Jones?
I did specifically say Indiana Jones. And I tend to, when I create my images, I'll add a lot of things as a former filmmaker. So I'll say volumetric lighting and atmospherics and haze, and talk about. I might have even on this one, I might have even said in the style of a Steven Spielberg film. It's that's probably what I did, because it's probably been trained on what a Steven Spielberg film looks like.
All right.
So then,
Now the producers of the last Indiana Jones used AI to de-age
right,
Harrison Ford.
right.
I've tried doing that on me, and dude, it doesn't work.
Maybe we'll do that on our next show. That'd be
Yeah,
a good
all
show.
right. You can de-age me. All right. So you've now done some video from this, right?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Hold on to your seats, everybody.
So the right image is another Midjourney image, by the way, and I did not say make it look like Harrison Ford. I just said extreme close up, Indiana Jones, same basic description, same setting, and boom, it looks like Harrison Ford.
It really looks like Harrison Ford. Okay.
So then I think where it gets interesting, and this is really kind of the extent of the lawsuit, because Midjourney just started doing video this week.
But
Prior to that,
it's an alpha. It's not ready to go out yet, but
it's really good though. I've done
now,
a
wait a
couple
minute.
of
Wait. They don't have it, but you used it? How'd you do that? Because you've
Uh,
got your tricks.
yeah, exactly.
You
No,
have
it's
you have
actually
friends in low places.
exactly. So you'll see in this video, essentially a lot of these work is you can give it a first frame and an end frame, and basically these video generators uh, fill in everything in between.
Wait,
And
whoa. You defined and created that first frame. You
mhm.
defined and created the end frame. And the next thing we're going to see was Midjourney saying, this is how the story goes.
Actually, in this case, I used a technology called Kling. It's just another AI video generator, but literally, it starts looking like frame one, it ends looking like frame two, and it basically figures out everything in between. So let's take a look.
Let's terrify our audience.
Yeah. So here's Indy.
Yep.
Notice the camera's moving, the the light changes as he holds this thing up to his face. And now you'll see
Whoa.
Darth Vader. It generated the sound by itself. I did not generate the sound. And then here's Deadpool.
Oh my God.
Deadpool came from one frame, loaded into Kling, and I said Deadpool disco dancing on top of a building with helicopters flying by, and that's what it created. So
Now,
you can see why the studios are concerned.
I noticed that that did not sound like copyrighted music.
So it generated the music, it
Okay,
generated the
but it
helicopter sound
didn't
effects.
grab a clip from some song.
No, but the way those
Why?
music generators work is actually conceptually exactly like the image generators.
Okay,
So
but my
they'll
point
sample other
is
music.
the music industry has apparently up till now been able to tell the AI group you cannot use our songs. You might have the 30-second sampling thing that we kind of let everybody do, but you can't use our full songs. Did the music industry lock that down, or just have we not gotten around to it yet?
I would say
I
there
mean,
are some
they've
really
been pretty aggressive about this stuff.
I truly believe that this suit that Disney and Universal brought will be a very important sort of precedent setting lawsuit. I use music generators and they're great. There's some like Udio. You can type in, I want a cinematic
Yeah,
soundtrack that sounds like John Williams. Boom, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you want. You can even type in lyrics and then there'll be someone singing. So technically, from a technical perspective, it's the same thing, right? It's just big pile of sample data. You give it a little prompt and it generates something that sounds like. And I would imagine the same legal concerns are there. Um, I
now
haven't heard, it's trickier with music, right? So you can have something that sounds like John Williams, but
is not John Williams.
Deadpool is Deadpool, right? Darth
Yeah.
Vader, everyone knows who Darth Vader looks like, right? So a lot of people make music that sounds like John Williams, so I think it's a little tougher to legislate against that.
Wow. Okay. Now, I did a show not long ago with a guy from, I think it was Fearless AI, and
Mm,
he had used AI working with a studio and the actors and the producers and the directors to overlay English speaking dubbing onto a sci-fi movie from Sweden.
yeah,
And it wasn't just they had the guys record the stuff. He actually modified the facial image in the movie
right.
to sync up the mouth movements and the facial movements and the eyes and everything else to the language that was being spoken. And it is impossible to know that those people weren't speaking English in that movie that was recorded and released 3 years ago. But it was done with the cooperation of
Hmm.
that whole group, and they were able to bring the actors back in to record them. So there is a way to do all of this stuff, phenomenal, terrific stuff legally.
Right.
Um, this one's going to take a long time to get through the court. By the time it's done, as they say, the it'll all be over.
Well, I
No
think
one's
there's,
going to stop it.
yeah, in fact, you know what? Maybe I'll pop up, if you don't mind, I'll pop up a couple slides that I thought are really helpful. And, people are so
Yeah.
split on this technology. And, as someone who always embraces new technology to kind of do storytelling, I definitely have gotten heat from people when I put some AI art up there. And I get it. Actors, voiceover people, designers, they're all very concerned about their jobs, as they should be. And to your point, here's something George Lucas, think I said last year at Cannes, right? Which is basically the genie's out of the bottle. Exactly what you were saying. Like, it's too late to go back because the technology's there, it works. And George Lucas is one of the most innovative filmmakers from a technical standpoint that exists. So I just like his message, which is okay, but it's here, right? And I always bring that example up of, like, as people are complaining about AI, it's like, well, you drive a car, right? I mean, you're not riding a buggy to work. So it's unfortunate all those buggy drivers and, stable boys are out of jobs, but, time moves on, right? So the question is the legality of it, though, because I think it is here to stay. I got a quote from another great innovator here.
Yep.
I like what James Cameron has to say about this, because he's a real artist, and he really believes in the artistic process. But I think his perspective on it is it's going to help us do things better, faster, cheaper, and maybe a film that couldn't get made will get made because of this technology. Also, like, he has an interesting perspective. He's actually on the board of a company called Stable Diffusion, which is an AI company. So he's clearly sort of embracing it. This quote, when he says, "I aspire to be in the style of Ridley Scott, in the style of Stanley Kubrick," that's my text prompt that runs through my head as a filmmaker. And this is something I always remind people, like, again, as a filmmaker, we're all influenced by other artists. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's more overt when Midjourney, maybe let's assume that they did train on this stuff. It's a lot more impactful, but no artist hasn't been inspired by writers,
Yeah,
composers,
it's it's
filmmakers.
it's it's not
It's part
like
of the
me
process.
me picking up a jazz riff from an old Miles Davis record.
Exactly. So I think, that we can pretend that that's not real, but it is. I mean, look at a film like Blade Runner. Every science film for the next 10 years looked like Blade Runner.
Yep.
Why? Because everyone loved it and they all copied it. So this is not new. Um, but I think the crux of this lawsuit is really those two things: is, did they train on copywritten images? Is that allowed legally? And then, are they making money on it? I think is really what it comes down to. And I think it'll be an interesting case. I don't know, what's your perspective. Do you think there's any chance
Well,
it
first of all, I don't think there will ever be an injunction on this one.
really?
I just because the judges won't understand it. It's the
Interesting.
same way that Congress can't pass laws about media because, they're still driving in buggies with horses. Um, so I don't think there's an injunction. So by the time this actually gets to a jury trial, the jury's going to say, well, shit, my 4-year-old can do that.
Totally.
Why are you suing that? So now what does the industry do to adapt. And the one thing that I see here is that one of the things that stops our industry cold is how much it costs to make good content and how long it takes.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, that equation can change dramatically and we can get into content. Now, God knows we still got way too much content. Nobody can watch it. And frankly, my own opinion, 95% of it's unwatchable anyway. But what all if all of a sudden we could get down to a place where 50% of the content being created was really terrific. And by the way, the form factor, the time, the duration of the content fit the viewer's needs. You mentioned TikTok. What if we could actually get to a point where Disney could create licensed new Star Wars content in 3-minute bits and
Mm,
monetize it? This is what that allows.
that's a
So
great
I
idea.
think, frankly, it's not going to take long, buddy. In another 2 or 3 years, we are right there.
Yeah.
I mean, people are already looking at working with content creators and going to where the content creators are, not forcing them to come to New York and sit in an office with a bunch of people who ought to be their grandparents.
Right.
We are getting to that mode. The industry will need and is learning, not teaching itself, but being forced to adapt to where this industry is going.
Well, look, it's a business, right? It's show business.
It
And
is a business. In show
we,
business, you got to make a show.
right. And we love it because we love, I know you and I love film and television, and we love the way it makes us feel. Like most people, we sometimes forget that it's a business and people have to make a profit and they're always looking for ways to cut costs. That's why they shoot in Budapest in Canada. That's why CGI and digital, it's all these things, right? It's twofold. It's cheaper and it's better. And so this is just a new version of cheaper and better. It will ultimately enable people to make films that either couldn't be made because they just couldn't be done,
Yep.
or they couldn't afford to make, right? I mean, I think even in
Right.
the case of like Avatar, Cameron sat on that for years waiting for the technology to catch up with his vision. And George Lucas did that with like the Clones movies too. It's like finally said, okay, now the technology is ready for my story in a way that's fiscally responsible, that I can afford to do it.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the part that I think ultimately pushes AI, Gen AI video over the top, just the reality of it. I think just this rights issue is going to be tricky. And actually, your idea of having sort of a, let's say in this case, a Disney branded AI generator, right? It's like, gee, make your favorite Star Wars clips, right? And either pay for it or they get some monetization or
Yeah.
they own the ad revenue.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't think it's unlikely the studios are, they can't turn a blind eye to this,
No.
right? Because they have to
And they
protect
can't
their
stop
IP.
it, you know?
Right.
And
So they
and
have to
to,
embrace it in some way.
and to your point that it might be cheaper to make films in Budapest, I got news for you. It's a whole lot cheaper to make films at a server farm in Utah.
Right.
Okay.
With less people.
With less people and
Yeah.
faster. And the
Right.
director can ask the software for a scene and look at a dozen versions of that scene and pick the ones that he likes. And then you have the art, and maybe the editors are actually the people that survive all of this, where you marry those scenes together into something that's a story, which is what editors do now, right? Take 6 hours of video and make it a 90-minute movie. Um,
Yeah.
Wild.
Well, look, I mean, I started doing stop motion animation, then I moved to other forms of animation. I ultimately went to computer animation because it's new tools, it's faster, it's better, it's cheaper. I still sometimes do stop motion because that's what I want to do and that's the right tool. But as a guy who's been making films on and off my whole life, I can make a film sitting here by myself. I can make a short film now. And that's incredibly empowering. And I think what you'll see is a sort of renaissance of new creative minds, mostly young, but even old guys like us still have a few tricks left in us.
Apparently
But
we do.
but I think it will democratize storytelling, and I think you will see new voices come out because suddenly they have this incredibly powerful tool, which is either free or almost free, and they've got a distribution platform with TikTok and YouTube, and suddenly most of the barriers that stopped guys without a lot of money and telling their story, well, guys and girls will be out there. So that's exciting.
I've never fully understood how ASCAP works, but the idea that I would pay into ASCAP a flat fee to use music, and then
Hmm,
ASCAP distribute that out to the rights holders for that music, it may be that a variation of ASCAP is what
right.
drives all this.
And then what ASCAP monitors, and if they see someone using it, then they charge them, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that seems like a model that could work, right? Because AI could also be used to monitor all this massive amounts of media.
Absolutely. And we'll get better at saying, okay, I'm not going to give you 3 minutes anymore. I'm going to give you about 3 seconds. You go over 3 seconds, I'm sending you a bill.
Right. Right.
And that becomes an easy business decision. Did I cut off my nose to spite my face by making it 3 seconds? Okay, I'll make it 5 seconds. And
Yeah.
there you go. Where do I draw the line between what is building my brand and making my shareholders money and supporting the value of my corporation versus just, turning everybody off and frankly having them go somewhere else for their entertainment instead of to me?
Yeah. I think people oftentimes confuse the potential power of AI generative art with the legal and sort of copyright infringement issues. Like the technology is not inherently good or bad. It just is, right? I think the question is what is legally and ethically okay? Is it okay to train on other artists' work? Artists are going to say no, they should get paid for that, and they have a valid point. Like, we all make art. That would be kind of terrible if someone could just go monetize it in some way. And then, yeah, there's, like you say, ASCAP, there's tons of mechanisms in place today that stop people from stealing, redistributing, making money on other people's intellectual property. So, in my mind, those are the areas that have to be shored up, and it's less about sort of demonizing the technology and more about making sure that it's kind
There
of
you
done
go.
in a fair, reasonable, legal way, in my opinion.
All right. Well, guess what? We're out of time, but this has been wild, buddy. I really appreciate it. And we're going to have to come back to it. And then I'm going to say and find out what other trouble you're going to get us all into. We probably broke, by the way, just today, we probably broke about 43 different copyright rules.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I'm not legally responsible if Rick distributes. I'm going to put that out there.
It wasn't me. It was Midjourney what did it. Okay.
Well, you're the best. Thank you so much. It's a great topic,
All
and
right,
we're
man.
always doing stuff fun.
Thank you much. We'll catch up. Bye bye.